I threatened to do this, now I'm going to do it. Everybody's got a neighbor when they were a kid. Neighbor, aunt, uncle, grandparent, family friend, whatever, that used to make cookies, and all the kids always were over there. Why? Because they were just good people. And back in the 60s, it wasn't a problem to have your neighbors and the kids over in your yard, even if you didn't have any kids, or even if your kids were elsewhere or whatever. Totally different time. And this is Aunt Ida's cookie recipe. She wasn't really our aunt. She just happened to be the lady that lived down at one of the other cottages by where my mom and dad had their summer cottage up on Lake Ontario. Always spent every summer there. Didn't know what life was like in our hometown till I was an adult. And there's just things you do. But we're starting out with 2 sticks of butter that are, even though they're room temp, this room's not that warm. And it's just regular salted butter. You can use unsalted, but this is her recipe. Modified a little. Original recipe called for 2 cups of sugar, cup each of white and brown. I've cut it back. I use a 1/4 cup of white sugar, 3/4 of a cup of brown. This way, it's just easier. And these are kind of a dumped together cookie. Can't really hurt them. You could freeze the dough, make it into the balls, get it ready for doing cookies. You can freeze them, you can put them in the fridge, bake them off as you want them. Just easy recipe. Yeah, a cup of white sugar and a cup of brown sugar is a little bit much. Plus they flatten out too much. I like a cookie that's a little more there. This will make about 4 to 5 dozen cookies. Because why bother if it doesn't make at least 4 dozen cookies? Cookies don't last long. We're just going to cream that all up and together. I got everything out already. Here we go. We'll give that a shot. Usually have it at oven at 350. Usually go about 10 minutes or so. Depends on how big you make your cookies. I use a smallish cookie scoop. That way consistency. But you can put this in a 9 by 13. If you're smart, use a little parchment. That way you don't have to grease your bowl or your pan. Works out real well. It's especially good for doing cookies on a sheet, parchment, because then you don't have to worry about greasing your sheet. So we just got cream it up together. Since I don't have a fancy holder, and this is a first try, we're just going to do this. See that? 3 minutes, we've got some cream together, butter and sugar. You could use a mixer, but it's a pretty dense cookie. And if your butter's a little bit warmer, it goes a little easier too. And then into that, we've got 2 eggs. One in. There's one. Give that a stir in. Why? Because it goes along easy. So Aunt Ida used to live down the way, and she would make cookies, and these cookies used spice gum. Original recipe was spiced gumdrops and walnuts. Well, not everybody's crazy about gumdrops. This is a recipe, probably dates back to the 40s. I was born in early 60s, and this is the first recipe I ever soloed on from making cookies, and I've been making them ever since. Matter of fact, when we talk about, because I use 2 cups of chocolate chips, just a regular small bag, but the thing about it is you can use 2 cups of any kind of mix-ins. If you prefer nuts, you can throw in half a cup of nuts, throw in chocolate chips and nuts. Just 2 cups of whatever feels good. So we'll take and finish getting that in. And we're not editing right now. We're just going to take and do it raw. Just like the cookie dough. Which, of course, I don't know what it is in your house. Our eggs are always fresh. I have no qualms eating cookie dough. Some people don't like to eat cookie dough because it's raw eggs. That's them. They can do them. Teaspoon of vanilla. So we got sugar, eggs, butter, vanilla. We got 2 cups of flour. It's real easy. And into half of it, I'm going to pour I've got a teaspoon each of baking soda and baking powder, and about a 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. If you're worried, avoid the salt. I like to put it in with the first batch of flour, just because it mixes better. You don't have any pockets that have just the baking powder or baking soda in it. Put in the rest. And in she goes. Let's see what we got so far. And like I said, you can do this in a 9 by 13. Cookies freeze. The dough can be frozen. You can keep the dough in the fridge. If you don't have, say you need them the next day, you mix up the dough ahead of time. No problem. So we got almost everything in here. Just give that another mix through. It's one of my favorite recipes. In our house, when we say we're making a chocolate chip cookie, we know it's going to be this one. Now this is the part that gets different. You can use scotchy ones in here too. The butterscotch chippies, peanut butter chippies. We just use regular semi-sweet chocolate chips. I've done them with the dark chocolate chips. They're not as good. And milk chocolate chips just kind of get lost in the recipe. So now that we've got this all nice and together, up next into the mix. There we go. Real simple. 2 cups of oats. And you can use quick oats. You can use, these just happen to be old-fashioned oats. It's what we like in the house for breakfast. Best thing to do after you mix this all together, before you start your oven warming, is just let them sit and soak for a minute. Brings everything in together real well. Yeah, so Aunt Ida used to make these cookies. This was the first recipe I ever tried by myself. I was 10. Been making them 50 years now. I'll let you do the math. But we have had a lot of fun with this. Christmas time, I'll take and get the sweet cherries, dried sweet cherries, and white chocolate chips and pecans, and that makes for a real good flavor combination. There we go. Alrighty. Yeah. Come to find out, many years later, that one of the reasons why you never really saw Aunt Ida out all the time was she was a depressive person. She had depression, but she was always just a kind soul and always good with us kids. Matter of fact, my sister, my youngest sister, and her granddaughter have been friends forever. Okay, 2 cups or 12 ounces chocolate chips. And basically, we're done. Well, pretty much done. Like I said, you can put any flavor into it that you like that. You can use the walnuts, and they use the small spice gumdrops. They're definitely different. And they do work very well in this recipe. That's the original recipe that had them. We always had chocolate chips, because let me tell you, cutting those little gumdrops into quarters is probably one of the messiest chores you'll ever do when it comes to baking. But there we go. There it is. Ready to do what you want. Bake them now, bake them later, bake them tomorrow. You can set up the cookies and put them in a airtight container like that, the lid. Throw them in the freezer. Put a layer, put some wax paper. Put down some wax paper, put a layer of cookies, put some more wax paper, layer of cookies, throw them up in your freezer. They'll last for, I don't know, they don't last long in my house. But that's just one of the things that we used to do. Yeah, good times. Aunt Ida's was right on the edge of a little piece of woods. We were about 3 cottages away. And she always had us kids over when she baked. And she would make these cookies, and they would be so good. And just wonderful memories of wonderful people that are no longer with us. But the recipe lives on. So, next up, these do grow a bit on a regular flat cookie sheet. I always line it with parchment. I'd put 20 cookies, 4 across, 5 down, and bake about 10 minutes, and then they're done. So I'm just going to let this dough rest a little bit because it's hard to stir. I'm just going to let it do its thing, and we'll get into making cookies in a bit, and that'll be, when I finish them up, that'll be the second video. This is a first. There's nobody here to lick the spoon. Oh well. Usually when they hear I'm making cookies, everybody comes out. But that's going to be it for right now. It's about 15 minutes. I hope I haven't bored you too much. Hope I haven't scared you off too much. Got my wonderful messy house here, but that's okay, because it's lived in. Clean enough to be healthy, dirty enough to be happy. So we'll see you next time.